All right, here we go. We are here, the 7 day educational informational. We are talking today about first and second grade readiness. All right. Yesterday we discussed kindergarten readiness, right? And there was information in there. I pray that you shared that information with folks. There is one thing that I also wanted to add to the kindergarten readiness. Another tool, I have many, but this one I think was really good. This one I think I got from Amazon as well. This may have cost 10, $12. All right. So just look at that for your kindergartner. This is also good for first and second grade. And the reason why I recommend it for first and second grade is because foundationally, sometimes our kids are missing a lot, right? And so, again, anytime you can give grades K through 3 in particular, things that they can touch and manipulate, all right? They can move, they can play games with. This I think is good because, first of all, it starts off with a card, right, that you put into this tray. And these dice here all have different letters on the side, right? So kids are constantly seeing letters flipping and all of that. They get to learn how to work with those things and then they get to set it up on the tray. This only goes up to 4 letters, okay? 4 letters. Now, my recommendation, if you have something like this, is you start off a few weeks, maybe 4, all right, with just, 3 to 5 times a week with the card. Eventually, what you're going to do is you're going to remove the card, all right, and just have them come up with the word, all right. So you may remove the card, and you just hold the cards, and then, you may set it to a timer, you may do whatever. You may have 2 kids compete against each other, but you'll say to them, okay, spell frog, right? They know that there are only up to 4 letters in a word with this game, okay? Frog. They're going to remember seeing this all of the times that they put these things together, right? And more than likely, they're going to be better at spelling this in just a few weeks than they would have been had they not had this tool, okay? So that's just another one. Amazon is just full of, I may even get a list of things that you all can just look through. I'll separate it by grade, and just have you all have some links where you can go and just purchase some things that I highly, highly recommend. All right, so today is first and second grade readiness. All right, let's go over some of the standards. I'm going to start with reading. I'm also going to introduce to you a reading percentage rule that I really, really, really believe that you should adopt today. Okay, and this works for every grade level up to 8th. Okay. So, grade 1, the Common Core standards for grade 1. Are you ready? Here's what your child should be able to do in first grade. I'm going to do first and second grade just so we can kind of look at what the similarities are, what the differences are. There are not many in ELA. Yesterday, I explained to you that ELA is really, really, really consistent throughout all of the grade levels. All right. The only thing that really changes is with prompting. So today you're not going to hear with prompting. Yesterday it was with guidance and prompting for kindergarten. Well, that's over. All right. Which further explains and further proves why it's so important for you to make sure that your kids are operating independently. Okay. I know we want to help. Some parents I know want to do the homework for their children. Please, you are doing them a disservice, okay, by not allowing them to have what we call productive struggle. Children should be afforded the opportunity to have productive struggle. All right? There should be a period of time where you find out what their frustration levels are academically. Okay? So please let them struggle. Let them develop a value for figuring things out. When I was younger, I don't know what age I was. Maybe my mama can tell y'all. When I grew up, I wanted to be a figure outer, right? There was something, and I still like figuring things out. But there was something about me that always wanted to just figure stuff out. And unfortunately, I've remained that type of person. But a lot of times we see our kids, get frustrated and we feel bad, right? And for me, when I had, my son was younger, I would make up excuses, well, he's tired and, well, he didn't sleep well last night. We come up with all of these things. And meanwhile, our kids are like, sometimes playing us like a fiddle, right? Like they know they just don't feel like doing it, right? But we sometimes aid them in making the excuses to not be able to struggle productively and academically, okay? So here are the standards for grade 1 for ELA, all right? They should be able to ask and answer questions about key details in the text. They should be able to retell stories, okay, including the key details, and they should be able to demonstrate an understanding of the central message or lesson. So, central message or lesson is the same as main idea. You may have heard main idea when you were growing up, right? But the central message or lesson is the main idea of the story. So, what is the main idea? Main idea is not topic, okay? Main idea is when you can summarize the beginning, middle, and end of a story with one sentence, okay? That's what it is. So, it wouldn't be like about cars. What's the story about? Oh, cars. No, that's the topic, right? What the story is about is how cars were made in the 1800s and how they have evolved, right, today. Now, that would be a main idea, not a topic, okay? They should be able to describe characters, settings, major events, all right, in the story using key details. They should be able to identify words and phrases in stories or poems that suggest feelings or appeal to the senses. So, yes, LaShonda, your 5-year-old is going to kindergarten. Yep. What I want you to do is go to the live from yesterday. All right. I laid out everything that I believe kindergarten children need in order to be successful. All right. Now you can stay on because this is for first and second grade. And I was explaining yesterday that we really should, as parents, be striving to make sure that our kids are at least 2 grade levels ahead. All right. So, first graders should be able to describe characters, settings, major events in the story using key details. All right. They should be able to identify words and phrases in stories or poems. Okay. So, this is the first time we're seeing poems, is in first grade. Now, a lot of times we think poems come right in middle school, high school. We think about all of the Shakespeare's and all of that stuff. No, your child really should know poetry in the first grade. Okay. Now, a lot of people will use things like Dr. Seuss, right? We don't necessarily always look at it as poem, but it is. Okay. So introduce them to poetry at a very early age. All right. Now, they should be able to explain the differences between books that tell stories and books that give information. This is when we are talking again about fiction, nonfiction, making sure that kids have the academic vocabulary, right? On the ready is going to be the best thing. I don't want you to say things like, what story happened in real life and what story is fake, right? Because what happens is your kids will take that language into the school. And when the teacher says fiction and nonfiction, they're really going to believe, trust me, that the teacher is talking about something completely different. So the reason why I stress using academic vocabulary is because it essentially um, stops the child from having to be rewired, right? Once they get into the school setting, okay? They should be able to identify who was telling the story. What point of view, right? Is it first person, right? Which is I, my, right? We, anything that includes the narrator. Is it second person? Second person is only typically used in advertisements, right? You should buy a Kia today because you deserve to drive in whatever. And then, of course, third person is he, she, them, they, all right? In the first grade, your child should know point of view. This is what the Common Core standards are telling us. So I'm giving you this information because many of us have to take some inventory today, right? You know your child better than anyone else. You know whether or not they are ready to have these kind of conversations in the classroom. So our parents listening to this 7-day informational should not be caught off guard, right? When you get into the school system this year and things are at this level, because like I said, the first day we started, schools are prepared to go in and kill it this year because benchmark grades have gone down significantly and schools are like, no, we have to bring this up to a certain percentage, okay? Which means that there's going to be more rigor in the curriculum this year. So parents that are listening to this, you shouldn't be caught off guard. Remember, it's corestandards.org. You can find all of the standards for whatever grade your child is entering into. Now, if you know your child is not on that level, you need to go a year before that, look at the standards, right? And figure out, okay, what can I do? Here's the thing, when I tutor people, a lot of times, one of the most disheartening things is when you have a parent who just loves their baby so much and they want me to tell them that the child is on level. And I've had third graders who, by the time I got done my assessment, I say, yeah, they're at like a K.5 level. And the parent's face is like, their countenance drops, right? Their heart sinks. But here's what they tell me. They say, I knew that though. Right? Like they know that the school has been telling them that their child is on a third grade level, but they also know their child. Right? They know if the child is doing work for real or not. They know if the child is reading every day or not. They hear the language that the child is using. They know better, right? I'm not going to ever give you a level for your child that require me to assist them on any different. I don't think it's fair to you and I don't think it's fair to the child. What can your child do independently and academically? That's the level that you should want. I know it feels good to hear my third grader is on a third grade level. It feels even better to hear that your third grader is on a fifth grade level. But you want to put some value when somebody can say, no, independently they're at like a K.5 level, almost first grade. Right? Because now at least you know what foundational things need to be laid out, okay? A lot of times we try to build on cracked foundations. And what happens is around the fifth or sixth grade, everything starts to crumble. Everything starts to fall through the cracks because the foundation, right, was not sturdy enough for you to be able to build on it. Okay, so this is why the Common Core standards are so incredibly valuable for you because you want to know foundationally, what does my child need? Let's just have a real conversation. Let's just be here's how you test it. You have a third grader, show them the third grade standards and ask them to explain to you what that means. If they're like, I don't know, you might want to have a conversation, right? You might want to dig deeper and build a foundation. All right. So a first grader is also supposed to be able to use illustrations. Those are the pictures and the details in the story to describe three things: the character, the setting, and the events of the story. Okay. A fancy word for events is plot. All right. So if you can use events and plots, right, together, meaning the same thing, please do that, right? Because the kid will get to school and hear what's the plot of the story and think that it's something grand. It's not. The plot is only the events. What are the events? The things, right? The major things that happen in the story. That's plot. All right? They should be able to compare and contrast the adventures and experiences of characters in stories. Okay? Finally, here's one with prompting and support. All right, you get one. With prompting and support, they should be able to read a prose. What in the world is a prose? Well, it's a type of literature. It is a regular story versus a poem. They should know the difference between a regular story with a narrator, like we typically hear, and poetry. All right, with prompting and support. This is the only area in the first grade standards that children get prompting in support, and that is being able to discern between what a regular story is versus a poem. Okay? That's first grade. Second graders should be able to ask and answer questions such as who, what, where, when, why, how. Okay? To demonstrate an understanding. So when you read your second grader a story, they should be able to give back to you who it was, what happened, where it happened, when it happened, why it happened. Okay? Let me help you out. When it happened is not just yesterday. When it happened could also be something historical. Okay? Did it happen hundreds of years ago? Right? Not just at 3 o'clock they went to lunch. Is this present day? Right? Is this historical? All right? This is your second grader. This is your 7-year-old. All right? This is what they should be able to do and explain. They should be able to recount stories, including fables and folk tales from diverse cultures, which means if you are building a library in your home, here's the suggestion that you don't just get books about American culture. You want to find out what's happening over in China, what's happening over in Japan, what's happening over in Africa, what's happening over in Russia. All right? You should have even your fiction stories could be about a Russian family, right? Could be about a family in Africa, right? Make sure that your library is full of diversity in regards to cultures. Okay, they should be able to determine the central message again, which is the main idea, the lesson, and the moral. Okay, so lesson, moral, theme. Okay, you're going to hear the word theme as we go a little further on in 3rd through 8th grade. Theme will be the word, but theme is really the lesson, the moral, the message that the author is trying to get the reader to understand about life. Okay, your 7-year-old should be able to give that information back. All right, they should be able to describe how words and phrases supply rhythm and meaning. Describe the overall structure of a story. Okay? So, what is structure? Structure is how it is laid out. Is it a letter? Is it a journal entry? Is it a poem? Um, does the author use comparing and contrasting? Right? How is the author laying this story out? And sometimes it's the physical layout of the story. Okay? So they should understand the structure. They should understand how the beginning of a story introduces it and how the end of a story concludes it, all right, or brings it to a close. This is a lot of information, all right? You may have to replay this. Share this with somebody who has a child in 1st and 2nd grade, okay? Tag them, share this with them. They should be able to acknowledge the difference again in the points of view of each character. Okay, so Johnny may see wearing school uniforms as a great thing for bullying, right? Sarah may see it as a way to stifle creativity, right? And it may cause bullying even more. They have to be able to look at what characters in the story feel and think, all right, about a certain situation in the story. Okay? They should be able to use information gained from the pictures that they see. So it should not just be pictures. It should be, hold on one second. All right. Somebody's telling me they missed it, but we're on right now because I came on a little later. So they should be able to use the information that they get from the picture, okay, to give information about the story, okay? By the end of the year, they should be able to read and comprehend literature, including stories and poetry, okay? So that by the grades 2 through 3, they can have more text complexity, okay? That's 1st and 2nd grade reading. All right, now let me explain the percentages, okay? Here's how the percentages work. Whatever grade your child is in, all right, so let's talk about 1st grade. Whatever your grade your child is in, you want to add a 0 to it. All right. So 1 with a 0 would be 10. Okay. You want to take that and make it a percentage, 10%. So if my child is in first grade, 10%. Okay. 10% of what? 10% of what they read should be nonfiction, which means 90% can be fiction. Okay. 10% of what they read should be about real life, real situations, real people. Okay? So this is where your biographies, your autobiographies, um, even stories that are based on real things. It might be about the Obamas, it might be about the whatevers. Okay? Real people, real things, real situations. Okay? 10% of it should be nonfiction, 90% can be fiction. Okay, just a rule of thumb. Now, your child is in second grade. What percentage should they read in nonfiction? 20. Okay, every year the nonfiction information increases by 10%. Okay, just a rule of thumb, something I recommend so that we create a balance. Now, at some grade, it's going to finally get to, and that's eighth grade, 80% nonfiction, 20% fiction. Okay, 70% nonfiction, 30% fiction for seventh grade, right? So you see how this is working. Okay, you want to make sure from first grade you are introducing your child to nonfiction text. It should be about real life. You should be having real life conversations with your first grader, okay, so that they are able to develop a few things. One, they develop more knowledge about the world and the world around them. The second thing that nonfiction text will do for your child is increase their vocabulary. Now, fiction texts are great. Some people say, well, fiction texts have other words as well. That's right, they do. But they also have nonsense words like wowza and zing and zap. All of these things that we call onomatopoeia, actually, which is a figurative language term, right? Which is a term that when you say it, it makes the same sound. So we might say a bee buzzed, right? Went buzz in the park. Well, when you say it and when you write it, actually makes the sound, right, that the thing makes. So zap, zing, right? We know that from like our comic books and all of that. That's a whole nother story. You want to make sure that from the first grade, your child is introduced to nonfiction text. Nonfiction text features like bold words, titles, subtitles, italicized words. When words are in certain colors, that typically means that there's a definition somewhere on the page. Okay? All right. So, second grade, 20% nonfiction, 80% fiction. First grade, 10% nonfiction, 90% fiction. All right? That is reading. Now, reading is so super important because by the time your child reaches um by the time your child reaches third grade, you are going to see that most of the math that your child gets is going to involve words. Okay? Word problems. It is going to be very, very, very popular for math to turn into a bunch of words by third grade. So this is why it's super important to make sure your child is reading in kindergarten, first and second grade, because by the time they get to third grade, we're not doing a whole lot of numbers in third grade. There's going to be a lot of reading. So if your child cannot decode, they will be frustrated. If they cannot pronounce words, by the time they get to the end of that word problem, they are going to be tired. So they're going to struggle through the words, but now they're not going to be able to comprehend it, right? Because their reading was not fluent enough for them not to be so tired at the end of it, right? That now they're frustrated. So you have to put into practice right now, okay? Something's going on with my signal. You have to put into practice right now for your child to read as much as possible. I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe you have a kind of point system, something in your house that rewards them for every book, right? But whatever you have to do, I am begging you, please, ma'am, please, sir, Make sure your child is reading a lot, because by the third grade, their math that in kindergarten, first and second only dealt with numbers, most of it is going to be reading. 80% of math turns into reading. So if your child cannot pronounce words, then more than likely they can't read to the point of understanding. Okay? Which is why this is so super, super important. All right, let's move quickly to math. All right, let's go to the Common Core standards for math in first grade and in second grade. All right, so by the first grade in math, are we ready? In grade 1, your child should be able to represent and solve problems involving addition and subtraction, understand and apply properties of operations and the relationship between addition and subtraction. Addition and subtraction, I call them cousins, right? They are very, very close. They're like first cousins, right? And anybody know first cousins grow up like brother and sister, right? But they're not brother and sister. They're first cousins. And what we know about addition and subtraction is that you can always check addition with subtraction, and you can always check subtraction with addition, right? What does that mean? 1 plus 4 is 5, right? When I go from left to right. But if I go from right to left, 5 minus 4 is 1, right? The same is true for multiplication and division. We'll talk about that with the third graders and the fourth graders later on this week. They're first cousins, right? I can always check my math with multiplication and division. 3 times 4 is 12 from left to right, but 12 divided by 4 is 3 from right to left. You can always check them with the other, okay? So that's the relationship. The relationship is that you can always check one with the other, all right? Add and subtract within 20. This is first grade, all right? So they should have all of their number and family facts, fact families for addition and subtraction for numbers 0 through 20. Work with addition and subtraction equations. They should be able to extend the counting sequence, all right? So counting sequence, they may be counting by twos, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, right? They should be able to tell me 14, 16, 18, 20 comes next, all right? Counting by threes, extending the counting sequence is a number and operations in base 10. We are a base 10 country, okay? Everything you see in math is going to be based on tens. 10, 100, 1,000. Place value, right? You have the one section, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, right? And so on and so on. They should be able to extend counting sequence and understand place value. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first grade. First grade. This sounds like something in middle school. It's not. This is first grade, okay? They should be able to use place value understanding and properties of operations to add and subtract. All right, next part is measurement and data. Get your first grader right now, run out today. Okay, get your first grader accustomed to using rulers. Rulers, tape measures, thermometers, right? That's also a type of measurement. All right, it measures temperature. All right, anything dealing with measurement, make sure you are getting them accustomed to understanding the value of measuring things now. Okay, they should be able to measure lengths indirectly and by iterating length units. What in the world does that mean? They should be able to use a ruler, but they also should be able to tell me if this ruler equals 12 inches or 1 foot. About how many feet is that desk? Right? So they're not going to take this ruler and do it. They're going to have to be able to look at this and say, oh, that desk is about 3 rulers long. Well, what's 3 rulers long? 3 feet long. Okay? They should be able to take this and figure out, right, what about estimation, about how long something is based on what they know about the ruler. Okay? They should be able to tell and write time. To tell and write time, to represent and interpret data. Okay? To represent and interpret data. What does that mean? They should be able to look at a graph and tell whether or not Tommy is shorter or taller than Johnny. They should be able to tell how many bananas were in the cart based on how many bananas they see on this graph versus apples. So if they see 5 bananas and they only see 3 apples, they should be able to tell how much more fruit Mary brought. All right, bananas Mary brought than apples, stuff like that. Okay, they should be able to reason with shapes and their attributes. What are attributes of shapes? They should know that a square has 4 equal sides, that an equilateral triangle has 3 equal sides. Okay? All right, finally, second grade. What should they know? Your second graders, here we go, should be able to represent and solve problems involving addition and subtraction, add and subtract within 20. That sounds like first grade, right? Because it is. But watch this. They should also be able to work with equal groups of objects to gain foundations for multiplication. Whoa, equal groups of objects. So here are some things that I recommend that you use for equal groups of objects. All right, you can find these on Amazon as well. These are counters. What I like about these counters is that they have 2 different colors. Okay, 2 different colors. All right, now you could do a lot with 2 different colors, but for the sake of this, what I would have them do is go ahead and, if I'm trying to figure out how many equal groups of 2 I can get out of 20 counters, right? What they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, they're going to be 20 they're going to put these in pairs, right? So they're going to line these up. This will be one group. Then they'll line up another one until they get to 10 groups. They're going to be able to look at their groups of 2 and tell me how many groups. Okay? So at the end of the day, they're going to be able to tell me that there are 10 equal groups of 2 in 20 counters. That's what they should be able to do. All right? Another thing that you can use for that would be Play-Doh. I like Play-Doh as well. So they can take some Play-Doh and kind of make their own little pieces, right? And maybe line those things up as well. That adds some fun. Skittles is also, or M&Ms is also a really good way to do it. Now, I don't recommend the peanut ones. For some reason, they always seem to, I don't know, they melt faster or something. But the regular chocolate M&Ms, the flat ones, or Skittles, for some reason, seem to last longer. The other good part of that is if you're doing it on a clean space and only that child is touching them, they can also eat it after they're done. Okay, another fun way to get math started with your kid. All right, your second graders should also be able to understand place value. We're almost done. They should be able to use place value understanding and properties of operations to add and subtract. All right, they should be able to measure and estimate lengths in standard units, relate addition and subtraction to length, work with time and money. Okay, this is when we introduce money, second grade. Okay, now I recommend, start money as early as possible. I don't see why you can't start money in first grade, but you can buy money, fake money from Amazon, right? And so they are the same size as the money that we use, which I like, right? So you have your quarters, you have your nickels, your pennies, and your dimes, okay? Start to have your children play with that as early as possible, right? What does that look like? You might even label some things in your house and have a day where they can go shopping, right, in the house, right? When I was younger, when we were younger anyway, we had imaginations. We did stuff like pick grass and make food and act like we were cooking and doing people's nails and acting like we paying with grass. And I mean, we had those, but this day and age, a lot of them are more technologically savvy, right, than we were. But it is good sometimes to put all of those things away, all right, and get something that they can touch and play with. All right. So please go and get money. All right. Get coin and get bills. They also have, I bought mine, I don't know, I bought 2 things for my preschool, and I probably paid $20, right, for that. And it gives you a lot of money, right? So you may give them what a 1, a 5, a 10, and a $20 bill looks like. You may even buy a $50 and a $100 bill. Why not? Why not expose them to all the bills? It's just 2 more Why not? Why wait until they're in sixth grade or fifth grade to talk about a 50 and a 100? The other thing you might want to look for outside of the quarter is the half dollar and the gold dollar, the coin dollar. Why not? Why not just introduce them to that? Because what happens is they learn about quarters until they're in like fifth grade. Then they learn something about a 50-cent piece, right? And a dollar piece. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. But this looks like the quarter. How do I now figure out which one is which? Well, introduce them to all of it now. Okay. So that way you save that. Why not? They're open. They're more open when they're younger to information than when they're older anyway. All right. I'm going to talk about sixth grade in a couple days. All right. Middle school in a couple days. All right. Finally, they should be able to represent and interpret data. And finally, reason with shapes and their attributes. Okay. All right. That is it for first and second grade. One thing that I also recommend now is that you get a binder started. This binder I actually used for my son when he was in the second grade. He was in second grade, and I began to just show you what this looks like in case you're interested in creating a binder for your kid who is in whatever grade. But there were just some basic things that I put in. So we learned the poems, and I put things in here about what stories were. And I actually got this right off of, I think it might have been freebie.com. Could have been Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm not sure. But you can get free accounts where you can download really good information. So this was about dramas, poems, right? Plays. We also had these charts. What is a digit? What is expanded form, standard form, place value? Okay. So these were just cards, and I didn't require him to do anything other than look at them. Okay. I want you to look at them every day and just kind of get accustomed to what they are so that they don't um, make you feel like you've never seen them before, because all of this stuff was in third grade, right? He's going to third grade, but I got this for him, created this for him right after his first grade year, all right, in preparation for second grade. So again, I wanted to keep him above level. So while he was in first grade, I'm already at third grade, right? He's going to third grade. I'm already thinking about private schools for middle school. I'm off of elementary, right? I'm on something completely different. So my preparation for him is already geared towards where I want to see him when he's in middle school. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please share this with someone you love. Someone you love who has a child in first and second grade. If this is a replay for you, please put replay. If you have a child, your own child in first or second grade, please remember to put a 1. If you do not have a child in first and second grade, but you know of a child in first and second grade, please put a 2. All right. Please have them contact me if they have any information. I love to give information. All right. But more importantly, please share this to somebody's inbox, somebody's page, somebody who could really use this information because you know that they are concerned about their first or second grader. This might also apply to somebody who's in third grade, right? Because some of our children are a year and 2 years behind due to COVID. All right. So please, please, please share share this with someone you love, and I will talk to you tomorrow.